to Athens and return. In October, when they had been married a year, Antony asked Octavia how she would like to go to Athens. Another winter of her brother's company, with that everlasting good gaming luck of his, was more than Antony could stomach. The Egyptian also kept whispering to him that his genius would be better off away from Rome and Octavian. So he had thought of Athens. Athens was also much nearer to Asia. He could keep in closer touch with Herod and his affairs in Palestine. He might go himself and help the Roman troops fight back the Parthians. He might even make an invasion into Parthia next spring. With the possibility of a dangerous campaign ahead of him, Antony made out his will before they left. Octavia kept delightfully busy with traveling arrangements for the baby and the packing. She did not see the will. Athens was not so exciting as Alexandria, but it was interesting and surely far more beautiful than this town made of brick. Antony took it to the temple of Vesta for safekeeping. There, in the most sacred spot in Rome, protected by the holy virgins, he knew it would be safe from prying eyes. It contained this sentence: "When I die, let my ashes be taken to Alexandria, to be buried by Cleopatra." Octavia was flushed with excitement as they set out for Athens. Although Athens had now been under the rule of Rome for 50 years, in her mind the famous old city was still glowing in the light of its golden age 4 centuries ago. The Acropolis was just as she had pictured it, a rocky hill rising above the city. But when she had climbed the marble steps leading to the top, she found the temple of Athena, the pale pink marble Parthenon, far more beautiful than in her imagination. And no one could possibly have described the mystery and wonder she felt as she stepped into the half-lighted interior and looked up at the magnificent statue of the Virgin Goddess. Towering 30 feet or more from her ivory feet to the crown of her helmet, Athena seemed truly alive in that dim, shifting light. A supernatural being watching over her city. Not until Octavia was out again under the clear blue sky could she realize that it was not the guardian goddess of Athens that she had seen, but a wooden statue carved 400 years ago by the great sculptor Phidias. She must have been a gorgeous sight, Antony was saying, before all the gold that covered her draperies were stolen. Octavia smiled up at him. Antony was looking very handsome that day, wearing the short white gown and white shoes of the Greeks. He was also in the highest of high spirits. Good news had come from one of his generals left in Palestine of a successful battle against the Parthians, who had now been driven out of Jerusalem and back to their own borders. So he was happy, and therefore Octavia was happy. When spring came at the end of a carefree winter, Antony took a run over to Palestine to see what he could do to help Herod get possession of Jerusalem. Though the Parthians had been driven out, the young Maccabeans, supported by a party of wealthy Sadducees, were still in control of the city. Up in Samaria, where Herod had large estates and properties, he had been well received and found many supporters. Most of the people Antony saw had been sensible enough to see that, backed by the Romans, Herod would win in the end. But the people of Judea were stiff-necked, a stricter kind of Jew than the Samaritans, whom they despised. Difficulties would increase as Herod went south along the Jordan River. Antony may have mentioned to Octavia that Herod had very wisely arranged to marry into the Maccabean family, which should make him more acceptable to the Jews, since that was their royalty. The young princess to whom he was betrothed was the granddaughter of the old high priest, Hyrcanus, and from all accounts she was extremely beautiful. A second carefree Athenian winter began, but was soon interrupted by desperate cries for help from Octavian. His sister's peace of mind was shattered, but Antony paid no attention. Octavian wrote that he had been defeated in a naval battle against the pirate Sextus because he was lacking in ships. Antony had a fleet of 300 vessels which were lying idle, but he would send none of them to Octavian's rescue, though his wife begged and pleaded with him. "Think," she said, "in exchange you may be able to get soldiers from Octavian to use against the Parthians." Using every possible argument, including tears, Octavia finally persuaded Antony to return to Italy and to offer Octavian part of his fleet, but then it was almost too late. Sailing into Tarentum, they found the shipyards noisy with hammers, and they saw hulls in every stage of construction. Octavian was building his own fleet. He had no use for Antony now, and wanted nothing to do with him. Antony was most willing to take him at his word, by Hercules, but Octavia begged permission to go ahead and talk with him. She found her brother with his two good friends, Agrippa and Maecenas. Agrippa was in charge of building the fleet. Maecenas had come down from Rome to help with negotiations. He had made the trip, he said, in the most delightful company. The poet Virgil had come with him, and another poet by the name of Horace, to whom Virgil had introduced him, and who had written a most amusing account of their journey. Octavia drew the two men aside, begged them to use their influence with Octavian, and then she pleaded with her brother. "I am utterly miserable. Every one looks to me to keep peace between you, and if you two remain unfriendly, I shall have utterly failed perhaps to protect Rome from another war." Her tears melted Octavian, for he loved his sister. To please her, he agreed to dine with Antony that night, and at length, with her help, they came to an agreement. Antony would leave 100 warships for Octavian to use in conquering Sicily. In return, Octavian promised to send 2 legions for Antony's future use against the Parthians. Then, with Octavia smiling upon both of them, the 2 men parted as nearly friends as they could ever be. Antony left for the East again. Octavia only went part way with him, kissing her on the cheek, telling her to wish him good luck, to be happy, and to take good care of the babies. He sent her back home. Octavia returned to Rome to mother a house full of children, Antony's and Fulvius, besides her own, 5-year-old Marcellus, his sister, and his little half-sister, Antonia, and the newest baby. And Octavia was not unhappy. She was glad to care for them all, and to keep the home open and ready for Antony's return, not knowing then that, having neatly slipped through the knot that bound him to Octavian, Antony never intended to return.